Hey guys, it's Andrew over at BHA here bringing you a new video. So of course I've been looking through different Docker containers as I've talked about in the past, just trying to find cool stuff that I can install and play around with. I'm always looking for cool new bits of software that I can kind of play with. But ran across this one. I'm sure it's been around for a while. I just didn't know much about it and haven't used it. But that's Guacamole. Basically, it is an Apache remote desktop gateway. And the great thing about this find that I found is that it's all contained in a single Docker container. I ran across several different containers and ways to set it up. And some of them require multiple Docker containers, one for the database and one for the front end. But this one has everything all in one, which I thought was super cool. And we're going to check it out right here. Now, as you can see here, one of the main downsides of this is going to be that this particular creation or install on GitHub says it's no longer being updated and it's gone into read-only mode. Now, it's still downloadable and you can still use it. And I've been using it for a couple of weeks now and I've had no issues whatsoever. But again, I don't know how long that's going to last. And hopefully someone will pick it up and kind of run with it, maybe fork off of it. But nonetheless, we're at least going to try it out, play with it. We can use it as long as it'll work, and we'll kind of see what we can do. So let's do a quick run through of everything we're going to cover in this video. So there's not a lot of steps to this video, but it's going to take us a little while to get this whole thing installed and go through all the setup. So this video is a little lengthy, but hopefully it won't be too bad. We're going to start by installing Guacamole in Docker. And of course, we're using Portainer stacks as we've used in the last few videos, as opposed to just straight up Docker Compose in the command line. It's the same YAML that you'll use in Docker Compose. And again, I'll have it in the description below so that you can choose how you want to do that install. Once we get it installed, then we're going to go over the configuration. After that, we'll walk through adding some servers, or at least show you how you can add some servers to it. And then lastly, just as an added bonus, we're going to go through and add it into Heimdall as well. Since I did a video on Heimdall not too long ago, I've been kind of playing around with that as well. So let's get started. Alright, so as you can see at the bottom of this little page here is the Docker run command. That's what we're basically going to be installing, but of course we're going to kind of convert it into more of a Docker Compose YAML setup here to be able to use it in Portainer stacks. We'll walk through all of that here. Basically, for starters, we need to create a Docker volume. We can do that within Portainer as well. We'll go down to volumes, and as you can see, I've already got mine created, but if I was creating a new one, I would click on add volume and basically give it a name of what I want to call it. I called mine guacamole_data. You can call yours whatever you want. Once we have that installed, we're going to go over to stacks, and I have Guacamole installed in my management stack, so we're going to click on management here. And of course, there it is down there at the bottom, but we're going to click on the editor so we can go through the full setup. So here at the top, I called it Guacamole, and for the container name, of course, I called it Guacamole as well. And I'll have all this in the description below so that you can just copy and paste it. The next line is, of course, the image for this Docker container. We'll set restart to always. Now for the ports, Guacamole uses 8080 by default, but because I use 8080 for some of my other containers, can't really do that for this one as well. So we're going to do a port forward of 7080 to 8080. And so, of course, under ports, it says 7080:8080. You can do yours however you want. If you're not using 8080 for anything, then of course you don't have to do any kind of port forward. Just make sure you open that particular port. Now for the volumes, we're going to point it at that volume that we just created. So we're going to say guacamole underscore data :/config. And once you have that in there, you would go down to the bottom and update the stack. It'll take a few minutes for it to probably go through the full install, especially if it's having to download the image for Guacamole. Once you do all that, then of course we'll go back over to the main containers section and we'll take a look at Guacamole. We'll click on that here, and as you can see, everything looks pretty good. I've already had mine running for a while, so not anything new there. We'll click on the logs, and as you can see, it is generating logs. I have no idea what all those logs mean, but I haven't had any issues with it so far. Everything has been working pretty good, so nonetheless, just wanted to show you that it actually is functioning. Once you have yours installed, let's go ahead and move on to the next step, and we'll take a look at the configuration. So when you first access Guacamole, of course, you're going to go to whatever the IP address of your Docker host machine is. So mine is 10.10.10.4. So for me, it's going to be the IP address 10.10.10.4 : and whatever port I configured for Guacamole. Mine is going to be 7080. Again, by default, the port is 8080. So it's just going to depend on what your configuration is. The default username is guacadmin, and of course that's also the default password. So that's what we're going to use to log in here. Now again, I've already been using mine, so I've already got some stuff already created, but we're still going to kind of go through everything. In the top corner up there where it says guacadmin, that's kind of your profile area. You can click on settings, and we're going to just kind of walk through some of these. If you had any active sessions going, they would be listed here. If you move over to the history section, you can kind of see logs, or at least some history of all the different devices that you've connected to. Then of course in users, this is where you would create any other users that you want and kind of control them that way. Now I recommend, if nothing else, changing your default password for guacadmin. For me, I went ahead and created another user. I just called it admin. And for the most part, I use that account and don't really use the guacadmin at all. Under the groups section, you can actually break out all your users into different groups and control them and manage them that way if you would prefer. I'm really the only one accessing this, so I don't really need any groups set up because I'm not really using any other usernames. All right, so under connections, this is where you're going to add all of your devices. And of course, as you can see, I've created different groups to kind of group mine together. So I have one that has all RDP connections. I have one that has all SSH connections. And down at the bottom, there's also one for VNC connections. Again, you can create them however you want. You don't even have to put them in groups if you don't want to. It's just more keep everything clean. All right, so under preferences, here you'll have the ability to set the display language if you want it to be something other than English, which is the default. And then of course, if you want to change your password for your user account, you can do that here. And then there's a couple of different options. I've left everything the default. It seems to work pretty good, but there's a section for default input method. I think normally it's set to none. You can choose to display an on-screen keyboard there if you want, or it will accept text input depending on how you want to set yours up. It's probably going to be some trial and error in how you might want to use it. That way you can determine which works best for you. They also have a section for default mouse emulation. You can choose tap to click or drag to move the mouse pointer. Now I've kind of opted for the tap to click. I think that's the default anyway, but I feel like there's always a delay otherwise if you're dragging it around and trying to line up where the actual icon is. So tap to click works much better. But that's it for basically all of the settings and preferences. There's not a whole lot you can do with it, but of course, obviously, you can see there are some things that you do have the ability to change. Let's go ahead and move on to that next step, and we'll get some servers added into Guacamole. All right, so again, I already have servers added to my setup, but we're still going to kind of click on them and kind of show you some of the various options and things that you have available to you. So for starters, we'll look at an RDP system. I have one called Gandalf here. We're going to take a look at it. For the location, that's where I created those groups that I kind of broke everything out to, so I have it called RDP. And then for protocol, you can see there's several different options there from Kubernetes, RDP, SSH, Telnet, and VNC. That's all the different protocols that this system will manage. So that's pretty cool. Now, I don't have anything in Kubernetes, and I don't really use Telnet for anything because it's not very secure, but their setups are going to be similar to what I'm going to show you here. So for this one, of course, it's RDP. Next, you can set some concurrency limits as far as how many connections can concurrently be connected. There's also some options for load balancing and proxy settings. I'm not using any of those, so I just left everything blank, which is the default. What you really want to get to is under parameters. So of course you need to put your host name and port. This is using RDP, so by default, of course, that's 3389 for the port. And then whatever your username and password is, leave your security mode set to NLA unless you know for a fact you're using it in a different way. That's kind of the default setup, and there's no reason to change that. I also said ignore server certificate. I'm on my local network, so I'm not super worried about it, so I think that will be fine. If you were using some sort of other remote desktop gateway, you could put in that information here. Next is a section for basic settings. You can choose the time zone and a client name and initial programs and whatnot. Again, I left all mine the default. There's a section for display, which allows you to set the default width and height of the screen that you want to display. Again, you may just want to play around with it for a little bit and see how well it works. And then you have the option to disable the clipboard and stuff if you wanted to do that. Next is device redirection. So you have the option to, redirect audio, local drives on the machine, printing, set up different paths for different file shares if you need to. There's a lot of customization that you can actually do with this and settings that you can have set for your various systems around your house. And then the next section is performance, and it allows you to disable certain things to kind of keep everything running smoothly. If you're running this on a slow machine or you have a slow network connection, then you might see some slowness, so disabling some of these features may help with that. Moving on down, like I said, I left all the rest of this blank, but there are different options there that you can play around with. One that I think is pretty cool that I don't use very often, but I might start using, is screen recording. So you can set this up, give it a path of where you want to save this file, and whenever you log into that system, it will record the screen recording for you and save it to a specific location. So that's pretty cool. We also have the ability for setting up SFTP if you want, and this will even handle wake on LAN. So basically what that means is if you're wanting to connect to a computer that is asleep, but it has wake on LAN enabled, then of course you can give this the ability to send wake on LAN packets, and it will actually wake up that machine whenever you want to control it. So that is pretty awesome. But that's it for RDP. Let's jump over to the home screen here, and we'll just click on RDP here and choose Gandalf. And as you can see, it came right up. It is pretty responsive. We'll open up a file share here. That pops right up. We'll open up Google. It's pretty quick, so pretty responsive for a Docker container, a remote desktop gateway. So that's pretty neat. Let's go ahead and jump back over to the system. We'll do a disconnect here, and then we're going to go back into settings, and we'll look at adding an SSH device. So again, for this one, let's see, we'll select Docker 2. This is an Ubuntu setup that I have all of my Docker containers running off of. Most of the settings are the same for this one. There's a lot of similarities. You can limit the number of concurrent connections. There's some load balancing and proxy settings here. But what we're looking for is under parameters. This is where you're going to set the host name for this system, as well as the default port for SSH, which is 22. And of course, if you're using public keys here, then you can set that up as opposed to using a password. But then you got color schemes and various things that you can set up. You can also put it in read-only mode. You can give it access to the clipboard if you want. And then there's some various command execution and whatnot that you can do in the actual session. So there's an area for terminal behavior. You have that feature to record the screen again, similar to what I was talking about with the RDP. And then you have the ability to SFTP and wake on LAN as well. Again, I left everything to default because I don't really use any of that, but you certainly have that ability, and so you may want to play around with that if that's something you're interested in. We'll go back to the home screen. We're going to go to SSH here and select Docker 2. And of course, boom, it came right up. There's my system. It, of course, looks like it needs to be rebooted because it's got some updates. LS, it's pretty responsive, pretty quick. We'll change directories here. And boom, there it is. Pretty responsive, so that's pretty awesome. All this is running from just a web interface, so you can't go wrong with that. Let's go ahead and exit out of this. We'll go back to the home screen and we'll look at a VNC connection. So let's go back to settings. Under connections, we're going to select one of these VNC systems. I have one called Trash Can. It's my Mac, one of those trash can desktops, so I just kind of call it Trash Can at the house. Same basic configuration. Protocol, of course, is VNC. We're going to skip down to the parameters section. That's where you'll list the IP and port number. There's the section for your authentication. You can set read-only on the display if you want, and there's a few options there. Not quite as many as there were with RDP, but it does have some things there. You can, share the clipboard. You can configure a VNC repeater if you want, and you still have the ability for the screen recording and SFTP as well. You also have a section for enabling audio if you want to share audio between the devices. And then, of course, lastly is the Wake on LAN, which I still think is super cool that you could have these machines asleep and Guacamole will wake them up for you when you try to connect to them. So that is pretty awesome. We'll exit out of that. We're going to jump back to the home page one last time. We'll go down to the VNC section and select trash can. And as you can see, I have a dual monitor setup on this machine. Shows both the screens there, just kind of in an expanded mode. But it's pretty functional. We'll drag this window around here, and as you can see, it moves around without too much issue pretty quickly. So that's it, guys. We've added 3 different types of systems to Guacamole. Everything is pretty smooth. Everything works pretty well. Let's jump over to the last step. We're just going to add it into Heimdall and kind of show you how that works. Alright, so within Heimdall, it's pretty easy to add systems, especially ones that are already kind of defined within Heimdall itself. We'll hit the section down here with the lines and dots. Looks like, kind of like a chart. We'll hit the plus at the top corner. Start typing guacamole, and it immediately starts listing guacamole. Then all we need is the URL for that setup, which, if you recall, was 10.10.10.4:7080. Once you have that in there, you can save it. And then, of course, it'll take you back to the main dashboard where we could click on Guacamole at this point, and of course, it opens right up. I was still logged in, so it immediately came to the main page without even having to log in. Normally, it would pop up asking me for that username and password, and I would have to log in. But that's the end of the video, guys. Pretty cool setup. Like I was telling you before, everything running in a single Docker container, and it still runs pretty quick. It's pretty responsive. Doesn't seem to be super resource intensive, at least not as far as I could tell. It's great for whenever you want a single location for accessing pretty much all of your systems, so that's pretty neat. We'll do a quick run through of everything we covered. So we started out by, of course, installing Guacamole in Docker. Once we did that, we went over just your basic configuration and features that were available to you. After that, we went through adding servers into Guacamole, both RDP, VNC, and SSH. And then just lastly, as an added bonus, we added it into Heimdall as well. But again, hit the link in the description below. Check out Guacamole. If not the Docker version, check out Apache Guacamole, their main page as well, because there are other setups and other ways that you can install it as well. So that's pretty cool. As always, I want to thank everybody for donating to my Buy Me a Coffee link. Every little bit helps. If you haven't had a chance, and I know there were some issues with my Teespring merchandise page, jump over to the address in the description below. Check out all of the Burns Home Automation merchandise. I do have that storefront back up and running, so you can definitely check all that out and see what we have to offer there. If you're looking for VPN service, check out IPVanish. Again, I'll have the link in the description below so that you can head over there and see what deals they have currently going on their end. Also, we have Robinhood. If you're interested in buying and selling stock, set up a Robinhood account through the link in my description below, and you and I both will get 5 free shares of stock. There are also options to buy and sell cryptocurrencies. There's not a whole lot of selections there yet, but there are a few definitely worth checking out there as well. As always, if you liked the video, please subscribe to my channel. If you have any questions or comments, hit me up in the comments below. If there are any videos out there that you would like to see that I don't already have out there, let me know in the comments as well, and I'll see if I can't get something put together for you guys. Otherwise, I'll see you guys around. Thanks.